Bob had been working with computers since he was a kid. Over time, he became very skilled. He just understood how they worked. Like many people in IT, he had moved from job to job over the years, gaining experience in different environments. At the time this story takes place, Bob was working for a service and distribution company based in Ontario, Canada. The company wasn't huge, and the entire IT department consisted of just 2 people, Bob and 1 other technician. About 3 years ago, the company decided it was time to modernize their software systems. Up until that point, they had been using several different programs to handle different areas of the business: dispatching, inventory, payroll, finances, you name it. Each program did its job, but they didn't talk to each other. Moving information between them was messy and time-consuming. So the company made a decision. They would invest in an ERP system, which stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. If you've never worked with ERP software, here's what it does. It handles everything: purchase orders, sales data, inventory, HR, payroll, customer records. Every part of the business can be managed from a single system. You can run reports that show which customer ordered the most of a specific part last year, which sales rep improved the most, or which vendor delivers the fastest. It brings everything together. Bob, from a previous job, already knew a specific ERP system very well. He recommended it to the company, and they went with his suggestion. Now, while ERP software is powerful, it's also very complicated. Everyone in the company would need to use it, but only the parts that apply to their role. For example, a warehouse receiver might log a shipment, confirm the quantity, and mark it received. That would instantly update inventory numbers, which the sales department could then view. But the receiver wouldn't care about pricing or vendors. They just did their part. Bob worked incredibly hard during the implementation process. He had to configure the system, make sure the data was clean, and most importantly, train every single employee on how to use it. Each person had a slightly different workload. It took a few months, but eventually the system was up and running, and things started to go smoothly. Even then, Bob still had a full workload. He handled support tickets when someone needed a software tweak and dealt with the occasional hardware issue. Then came the next challenge. The company began expanding into different parts of Canada, different time zones to be specific. That caused problems. In Atlantic Canada, the time is an hour and a half ahead of Ontario. So if someone sent an email or order at 8 a.m. their time, it would arrive at 6:30 a.m. Ontario time. On the other side of the country, in Pacific Canada, they are 3 hours behind. So a 3 p.m. email from Vancouver would show up at 6 p.m. for the Ontario staff. The result? Business hours stretched out. People were coming in earlier and staying later just to keep up. Bob would arrive at 8 a.m., only to find messages and support requests already waiting, and people were annoyed that he didn't reply right away. The same thing happened in the evening. His phone would ring at dinner time with someone needing help right now. To fix this, the company decided to stagger the IT department shifts. They wanted Bob to start at 6 a.m. and finish at 2:30 p.m., while his colleague would start at 10:30 a.m. and work until 7 p.m. There was just one problem: Bob's colleague had kids and couldn't work the later shift. He refused. The company pushed him anyway. So, the colleague quit. That left Bob as the only IT employee. The company said they would hire someone new. But there was a catch. They needed someone who understood the ERP system, and they were offering a salary that was well below market value. And surprisingly, they struggled to find anyone. Meanwhile, Bob asked for a raise. The company said no. So he asked to be paid overtime for all the extra hours he was putting in. But the employer claimed that, under Ontario labour law, IT specialists are exempt from overtime. Bob looked it up. They were right. Technically, he wasn't owed overtime under the law. This went on for months. Bob spoke with friends in the IT field. Many of them had heard about this company and what they were offering new hires. Bob realized they were never going to find someone qualified who'd accept such a low salary. As time passed, Bob's situation got worse. He was expected to answer calls and emails at all hours, even if they came in late at night or early in the morning. He had to train every new hire on the ERP system and still take care of the hardware. He kept asking for better compensation. The answer was always no. So Bob started planning his exit. But first, he had a little revenge to take care of. Here's how it went down. Bob had full access to the ERP system. One of its features was logging every employee's login and logout time. Even if someone didn't sign out, the system would auto-log out after 15 minutes of inactivity. Bob knew that nearly everyone in the company was salaried, but that didn't mean they were exempt from overtime. In Ontario, even salaried employees must be paid overtime after 44 hours a week, unless they're a manager or supervisor. So Bob pulled a report for every non-manager in the company, going all the way back to the day the ERP system was launched. It showed exactly how many hours each person had worked. Then Bob reached out to an employment lawyer. The lawyer told him it was completely legal to share this data and refer employees. Bob lined up a new job. Then, shortly after leaving the company, every employee got an email from Bob. The subject line was, "You're legally entitled to overtime pay." Attached to the email was an Excel spreadsheet with all their logged work hours past 44 hours per week. In the body of the email, the name and contact details of the employment lawyer. And then, all hell broke loose. Almost every employee signed on with the lawyer. The lawyer negotiated on their behalf, and the company had to pay out a huge amount in unpaid overtime. All they had to do was pay Bob fairly for the work he was doing. Instead, they ended up having to pay nearly everyone. Back in the early days of the internet, when everything online still felt new and full of potential, I was attending my local junior college. Not long into the semester, I moved in with my girlfriend so we could both save on rent. For this story, I'll call her Emily. One night, Emily said she invited a friend from one of her classes to come over for a game night. Sounded good to me. We also invited a couple of other friends, and honestly, it was a really fun night. Surprisingly, her friend, let's call her Jess, was someone I actually knew from high school. We weren't close, but we got along just fine back then. After that, Jess started coming over regularly for dinner, game nights, or to watch movies. She even brought her boyfriend over a couple of times. We'll call him Alex. Alex never quite fit in. He was quiet, standoffish, and didn't really engage with anyone. It felt like he didn't want to be there. Everyone sensed the awkwardness, but we invited him out of politeness to Jess. Luckily, he only came over 2 or 3 times before he started making excuses to not join. A month or 2 later, Jess called Emily crying and asked if she could come over. Of course, we said yes. When she arrived, she shared what had happened. Alex was upset with her for spending so much time at our place. He accused her of cheating. She never said whether he thought she was cheating with me, Emily, or both, but whatever he thought, it was ridiculous. Nothing ever happened. Alex confronted her, started yelling, and called her awful names. When she tried to walk past him to leave, he shoved her. She fell backward over a coffee table and ended up with a big bruise on her lower back and butt. Emily told me about the bruise, just showed it to her. I didn't see it myself. Jess insisted Alex had never laid hands on her before, and she believed it was just an accident. But I was furious. I don't believe in violence, even though I'm a big guy. I've never been in a fight. But I wanted revenge. At the time, I was working in the school's administration building as a student employee. My job gave me access to student records, class schedules, fees, all that stuff. The deadline to add or drop classes without penalty was coming up. So, I looked up Alex's record, found his student ID and everything I needed, and put my plan into action. On the very last day to change schedules, I used one of the special enrollment phones in the admin building. This was before online registration was a thing. I dropped all of Alex's classes. Then, I added him to every class I could find that had a course fee attached. If you owed fees at the school, you couldn't request transcripts or anything official. On top of that, Alex was an international student. That meant if he wasn't enrolled in enough units, he could lose his visa and be forced to leave the country. I never told anyone what I did, and I avoided looking up his records again for a while, just in case it could get traced back to me. But I did get a little payoff. Jess was worried about running into Alex again. She had an English class with him on Tuesdays. She told us that when Tuesday came around, Alex showed up, but there was also a new student standing in the back of the class because there weren't enough chairs. The teacher noticed this and decided to take roll. Guess who wasn't on the list? That Alex. He tried to argue, but the teacher had the official class roster, and Alex wasn't on it. So there was nothing he could do. Jess said he never came back to that class again. Eventually, Emily and I broke up, and I didn't see Jess much after that. But one day I checked Alex's schedule again. All the classes with fees were gone, and he wasn't enrolled in anything else either. I don't know if he got kicked out, left, or something else. But he was definitely inconvenienced and possibly deported. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. But then I remember what he did and I don't feel bad at all. Mess with me, fine. Mess with my friends? Big mistake. I'm a woman in my 30s, and I've been a people pleaser most of my life. I've worked in marketing for over 10 years, and I've had all kinds of bosses, some good, some average, and some truly awful. One boss, in particular, stood out as the worst. This happened about 5 years ago. Let's call her Pamela. She was in her 40s and had been hired as the VP of Marketing and Sales at a mid-sized retail company. I was already working there when she was brought on. And if the rumors were true, she wasn't even the company's first choice. She was therefore to pick, hired mostly to make shareholders happy. I was a manager under her. My job involved making sure products were merchandised properly online and in stores. I also handled monthly sales materials, advertising, and the department's budget. I managed all of our projects and operations, created sales reports, put together presentations, wrote creative briefs, and more. In short, I did the hard work and a lot of it. Pamela? She mostly showed up after 10 a.m., went out for long business lunches, and spent her time planning company parties. Oddly, I planned those too. I had access to Pamela's email, and often sent emails on her behalf just to keep the department running. I constantly questioned her party spending because it was eating up our budget. Pamela told me to pull money from future months to cover the current overspending. At the start of each month, I had the original budget. By the end, I had to edit it under Pamela's direction to make it look like she was staying within budget. This detail becomes important later. I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes sometimes. Handling so many tasks was overwhelming. I was regularly working 12-hour days, splitting my time between the office and my home. After my child went to bed, I'd go right back to work. I also worked weekends, early mornings, and late at night, while my family slept. Pamela's first major holiday season came around and sales were terrible. She kept changing her mind about how the store should look. She brought in new advertising and PR agencies, most of whom were her personal friends. She ignored the promotional strategies created by our merchandise and buying teams and replaced them with her own. At the same time, I got really sick. I had an infection that turned into sepsis, and I was hospitalized. My doctors and my husband said stress from work played a big role. They told me I needed to rest and recover. While I was recovering, I started to reflect. I realized how much this job was hurting me, my family, and even the company. But old habits die hard. Eventually, I opened my phone and checked both my email and Pamela's. That's when I found something that made my blood boil. Upper management had sent me a beautiful bouquet of flowers. It was a kind gesture. I knew Pamela had organized it because they were her favorite flowers, not mine. I went into her inbox to file a receipt for accounting. But what I found in her recent emails had nothing to do with business. Pamela had been emailing her friends complaining that I couldn't just shake off sepsis and get back to work. She also whined that she couldn't find my notes, spreadsheets, or documents that were clearly labeled and organized on our shared drive. Then I found another email that really got to me. She had emailed a friend from a previous job asking for advice on how to turn sales around and save her position. In this long email thread, the friend asked if someone else was handling the majority of the department's work. Pamela said, yes, it was me. The friend then replied, saying that if sales didn't improve, it would be easy to blame me. They discussed the idea of making me the scapegoat. Pamela mentioned that I was in a hospital, and repeated the same insensitive comments from earlier. The friend warned her not to fire me immediately since it could be seen as retaliation. But if Pamela could claim I was stealing or misusing company resources, then she'd have a solid reason to fire me. Eventually, I returned to work. Pamela called me into her office and told me she was worried I was taking on too much. She said she wanted to take the department budget off my plate to help. From now on, she said, I would only drop off a small stack of invoices to accounting. She added that I was not allowed to talk to accounting about anything budget related. If I had any concerns about my workload with the department, I wasn't allowed to go to HR. I had to talk directly to her. At that moment, I knew exactly what she was doing. But here's where Pamela made a mistake. I had a great relationship with Lois, our main accountant. Lois was in her 50s, very sharp, and had always said she would help me if I ever needed it. So I took action. I grabbed the stack of invoices from Pamela's desk and got ready to bring them to accounting. But before I left, I added a few things. I included the email threads I found while I was in the hospital, the unedited monthly budget that Pamela hadn't touched yet, hard copies of old budgets with Pamela's handwriting showing what numbers to change, and an email from earlier that year where she subtly threatened to replace me if I didn't do what she asked. When I got to accounting, I ran into Lois. She brought up the invoices. I looked her in the eye and said, Pamela is the only one you're allowed to talk to about our budget and invoices. Lois glanced at the thick folder I left on her desk. She gave me a fair nod and lovingly told me to leave her office. Within a week, Pamela was fired. I later found out she's been job hopping ever since. The CEO and HR personally apologized for everything I went through. They gave me a paid 1-week vacation to use whenever I wanted. I stayed with the company for another year, but eventually left due to other issues. Now, today, I'm working as a sales and marketing manager again. I have a new boss, let's call him Mike, in his 40s, and he's fantastic. He trusts my judgment and supports me on almost everything. I'm even building a new team that I'll lead directly. Earlier today, I was reviewing job applications. And there it was. Pamela's resume. At first, I thought maybe it was someone with the same name. But no, it was definitely her. She hadn't moved up since she left our old company. VP was still the highest title she ever held. On her resume, she had even embellished her accomplishments, claiming credit for work I had done, and saying she drove an 87% increase in sales during the holiday season. I've always tried to give people the benefit of the doubt. I've always been a people pleaser. But let me tell you, it felt amazing to click disqualified. Edit, some people have suggested I should have brought her in for an interview just to see her reaction. I'll admit I was tempted. But I didn't want to risk my new boss questioning my judgment. Maybe I'll just write her a personal rejection email instead. When I was in elementary school, I had a bully. Let's call her Aya. That's honestly the nicest thing I'll ever do for her, give her a name. It all started in first grade. Aya was instantly popular because she talked about her time growing up in Ghana before moving to the US. I thought that was cool. As a Mexican American growing up in Texas, most immigrants I knew were from Mexico. Curious, I asked her what life was like in Africa. She looked at me and, with a smug smile, said, "A lot better than Mexico." At the time, I thought it was a weird thing to say, but we were just kids, so I let it go. But as the years went on, her comments toward me, always about being Mexican, became meaner and more deliberate. In second grade, we were learning about racism. During a lesson on Martin Luther King Jr., A turned to me and loudly said, "Albino like you would never understand." It was humiliating. She had used a slur and right in the middle of class. I looked at my teacher for help, but she just shrugged and went back to the video. I told my mom what happened. She was upset, but tried to be optimistic. "Maybe A didn't know what that word meant," she said. "Maybe she'll apologize." She didn't. Over the next 4 years, A continued to target me with racial slurs. She called me names like beaner and wetback. She mocked my appearance, my weight, my hair. During D.A.R.E. week, she even used the smell of cigarette smoke from my clothes thanks to my mom's boyfriend as a reason to humiliate me. The rumors she started followed me through 6th grade. My mom tried to intervene multiple times, but the school always brushed it off as just kids being kids. When my grandfather passed away, A approached me and, for the first time, seemed sympathetic. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had changed. But then she said, "It's sad that he had to die just to get away from you. I would do if I had a granddaughter as ugly as you." That broke me. Even after all that, the school still did nothing. When my mom finally forced my teacher to speak up, A cried and said, "It's because I'm black, isn't it?" And just like that, the teacher backed down. By 6th grade, things had started to quiet down, but the damage had been done. I used to love drawing. I wasn't amazing at it, but I practiced every day. One day, I was drawing Sailor Moon during free period and left the room briefly. When I came back, my drawing was ruined. It had slurs written all over it in permanent marker. And A was laughing. I confronted her, crying, asking why she hated me so much. Why she was being racist when I had done nothing to her. We were sent to the office and the principal told me to apologize. Nay. The victim. He told me they were just words and again brushed it off. That moment stuck with me. I knew she could get away with anything. And she did. I stopped drawing. I lost interest in art completely. My self-worth plummeted. I hated being Mexican. I hated my indigenous features. I hated myself. After elementary school, A went to a different junior high. The bullying finally stopped. But the effects lasted years. I went to therapy. My family gave me love and support. I visited the tribe we descend from, and they helped me embrace who I was again. In high school, I avoided Aya entirely. She acted like a model student. During Black History Month, she gave speeches about inclusion and embracing diversity. I had to bite my tongue not to laugh. What a performance. Years later, in 2021, I got a Facebook message. It was Aya. She was organizing a reunion for our elementary school before it got torn down. I wasn't planning to go. That school only brought me pain. But then I thought, this could be my chance to expose the truth. I told my mom, who still had all the notes from back then, the ones she'd written, and even my ruined Sailor Moon drawing. She kept everything. With those documents, I made copies and even included a note from the principal at the time, admitting A used slurs. That was my proof. I went to the reunion. A was giving a heartfelt speech about memories, unity, and how the school helped shape her. When it was my turn, I calmly said how the school gave me nothing but trauma. How my mom had to spend thousands on therapy. How A bullied me mercilessly, and how the school let it happen. Then I looked directly at Aya and said, "You're a prime example of the American dream, an immigrant who came here and succeeded, and I'm so glad you grew out of your racism." And I left. Later, I anonymously sent the documents to a local equality group A volunteered with. The fallout? Massive. She was removed from the organization. Her fiancé broke up with her. She lost her job. Her parents, who never knew, were furious. My old principal even lost an award for excellence in education after the superintendent saw the notes. Some former classmates told me I should have just let it go. Or this wasn't about revenge, it was about closure. I've moved on now. I'm happy. I'm married. I've accepted who I am, proudly Mexican, proudly indigenous. They tried to take that from me. But in the end, I took back my power. And that's the story of how I stood up to my childhood bully and finally got the justice I deserved.